Hi everybody, my name is Phil Davis and I'm the CEO at Flyform. We're an elite partner here in the UK and platinum sponsor here for the event. So thanks a lot for coming and attending the event. We really appreciate your time today. We're going to be talking about CMDB, specifically to a SIAM operating model. We've got a special shout out to Steve Morgan at Syniad. Steve's one of our partner organizations who we worked with on preparing the content today. We highly recommend Steve for any of the kind of process work you're doing or coming along in conjunction with us. So, first of all, for people that don't know, what is SIAM? So, SIAM is service integration and management. It's a management methodology that's been put together to help vendors and customers work in a much more cohesive way together. So where we typically have multi-supplier environments, lots of different towers or lots of different suppliers providing different services, SIAM's kind of goal is to kind of gel all those together, a kind of single pane of glass view into that estate. So it's giving you the ability to manage those different suppliers in the environment, hold them to account, view all the metrics with transparency, and you keep owning that data. But ideally it's just to help you manage them better day to day and get a better service for yourself and for your customers. So a typical SIAM model includes a customer organization, one or more service providers, and typically a service integrator layer. What we are seeing more and more often these days is a lot of customers are bringing that service integration layer in-house. So typically in the old days, a lot of people would outsource all their towers into the SIAM environment, and that could be the end user compute, the application support, infrastructure, these various towers. But there was also a service integrator tower. Historically, that would also get outsourced. What we were seeing with customers typically over time is that that service integrator layer being outsourced wasn't working very well for them. And they started to want to bring that layer in-house. The primary reasons being they gain control back, they gain transparency and control over the data back, and that ultimately that enables them to hold all the suppliers to account and really drive that service excellence through that we all ultimately want to provide for our customers. So what's a CMDB? I'm sure most of you know since you're here, but CMDB, the config management database. CMDB is it's a wonderful topic. It's something in Flyform we talk about a lot. It used to kind of be talked about as being the kind of the heart of the ITSM tool and the platform. For us in Flyform right now, we talk about CMDB as being the heart of the entire enterprise. So if you guys really want to kind of mesh all of the ServiceNow platform capabilities together, get visibility on your data and drive an excellent customer service, having this top tier CMDB, the foundation of your system, is really absolutely paramount. So why are we talking about SIAM today and why are we talking about it with CMDB? As I've kind of said, multi-sourcing is very much becoming the norm now. We saw a lot of uptake with SIAM predominantly in the public sector originally, and a lot of people in private sector were kind of dipping their toe in the water, mainly around very large organizations. I think as time has gone on, people have realized that to really drive the kind of best quality of service and the best customer experience is a really beneficial thing to use specialists in each of the towers that are available. Bringing in those different suppliers, getting specialists in each area, driving some competition between them, driving better pricing between them, but ultimately you still sitting in the driving seat of providing that service. As we kind of say here, it's the coordinating of the people, processes, and tech across all those providers, and just getting that end-to-end service tied into the integration layer for the customers. So when we talk about SIAM these days, we still often talk about it in an ITSM perspective for IT service management, but we're now bringing in all these other areas, so business relationship management, project delivery, supplier assurance, commercials, IT governance, and finances. All of the business now are impacted by this SIAM layer, and if you don't get each of these kind of brought into that process, you end up with a really kind of fragmented and broken delivery. It's no good having ITSM in a silo somewhere, running a really good incident process for you, if when you try and roll out a new part of that process, the project delivery piece isn't tied in, and you're dropping the ball, and you're getting budgetary problems, things are overrunning, projects are not being delivered on time. So getting all of these bits together is a really key element. So the CMDB in the SIAM environment. So there's a lot of challenges. I'm sure for any of you that have been through it, particularly those of you maybe in secure or regulated environments in particular, or working with large SIAM partners who have a lot of rules, a lot of governance, and a lot of people kind of involved. A lot of these kind of challenges come up. So a lot of the time you'll have different systems being used. So each of your suppliers maybe going from an ITSM perspective, they've got their own bespoke version of ServiceNow, or you've got someone on Remedy, you've got someone using a bespoke CMDB, so you've got all these different technical products out there. How do you tie all those together to give you the visibility you need? Naming conventions is always a problem, so we quite often have different partners out there with all talking about the same CI, but in a different way, a different term. Breaks reporting, breaks response times, everything comes undone. All of this is underpinned essentially by the data model. So by owning that SIAM layer yourself and coming up with that convention, owning that data model, it really gives you that control back on how all that data should be fed in, how you can manage and report on that data afterward. So other tips we've got here, the scope. The scope is always a really, really big factor. So when you're going into multiple suppliers, we see one of two things typically happening. One is data is missing, so you're getting stuff in, it's either missing attributes or you're missing the classes in your CMDB completely, or you've taken too much. You've gone into a supplier, they've said yes, you've ingested all the data, there's been no scope and no planning, all of a sudden you've got basically, now you've got, instead of one mess of data, you've got 5 different messes of data, and you're still not achieving the actual outcome that you want, which is this cohesive view. So there can be a lot of governance and maintenance around this to bring it all together. The final piece here is the reluctance of the service providers to use the same tool. So a lot of these guys, as I said, they're using their own different tools. A lot of them also have security rules and regulations, their own data storage regulations. They may have CI data in secure environments that you can't access. So how do we go around getting all these challenges, pulling them down and basically getting this to work? So we kind of talk about these 10 steps that we go through, some are kind of more important than the other, and we'll touch on them. So step 1 is obviously undertaking that fact-finding phase. So for me, this is all about the outcome. So what are we actually trying to achieve with this piece of work in the SIAM environment? What do we want this to look like in 3, 6, 12 months? When we finish, which services are we underpinning? What do those services look like? And what do we need to do to enable that to work? Making sure you've got the basic building blocks. So going back to the things we talked about, data models, kind of what are the rules of engagement? How are we getting this data to and from each other? How often are we getting the data? What does that delivery mechanism look like? What does that format look like? Number 3 is a really big one for me. So setting the data bar at a realistic level. Now this isn't just a problem for SIAM projects, but also CMDB projects as a whole. We very often see people who want to try and boil the ocean, as we call it. So they've got this CMDB nirvana in their heads, which is a great thing to aim for, and is fully possible, but it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to come and put this tool in, even in a 3, 6, maybe not even in a 12-month project, and get that perfect peak state CMDB that you want that's going to serve everything. So when you come in on day 1, talk about that conversation of what is the minimum that we need to function in this service? What's the MVP look like? Where are we going to get that data from? And set that bar at that real level. So number 4, designing the end state. So as I said in point 1, what does that end goal look like? Where do we look 12, 24 months from now? How should this be functioning? What's the golden kind of standard for this service? Number 5, considering how the data will be maintained. So again, this is a kind of generic CMDB tip, but so often people will do the first few steps, they've got the building blocks, but nobody's maintaining it. You haven't identified a data owner, you haven't identified the process owners. The data is out of date on day 1, and as soon as your CMDB data goes out of date, everybody loses confidence, it stops getting used. All of a sudden then it's just another waste pile of money that someone spent on a piece of the tool that doesn't work. It undermines other things. So really identifying those data owners, agreeing the mechanisms for maintaining that data, they're really, really key. This kind of takes us into point 6, so coming into that data maintenance, where you can, we always recommend you use automated tooling. So use discovery dependency mapping technology. Discovery for us is a mandatory pairing. We always recommend for any of our clients who, if you're buying ITSM and you're doing CMDB, we much prefer to see you doing discovery tooling. It doesn't have to be ServiceNow's discovery tool. We obviously recommend it, we work with it, it's native to the product, so we like it. You could be using a different discovery tool, a standalone one, or one that forms part of a different product. But wherever you can, don't rely on manual data entry processes and manual change control processes. They're good to a degree, but you'll never get the kind of level of data clarity that's expected in today's modern world. So the next step, feeding into that discovery tool, data integration and exchange. So how are we going to switch this data between the suppliers to us? So again, if I was going to draw out my Nirvana, SIAM, CMDB world, you'd get them on the contract, they'd sign on to, they'd use your tool, so you'd get them to onboard onto your ServiceNow, and you deploy your ServiceNow discovery tool into their environment, so you put mid-servers out into their estate, so you're owning the tools, you're owning the data, you're pulling it in. Going back to the earlier points I made, when we start looking at security and shared data centers and things, often that's not possible. Often there are legacy contracts in place that mean that's also not possible, but that's got to be the gold standard, and we tell people then work your way back from there. If you can't deploy your tooling and your discovery to their estate, can you get plugged into the supplier's discovery tool? Can you take a data feed from there? If that doesn't work, then you start to talk about manual feeds from exports, and we would automate those. But again, we've got a kind of staged approach to start at the gold standard, work your way back, what's feasible, what's affordable, and what's agreeable with the supplier, and try and build it in from there. So, going on to number 8, developing the data model governance. So the data model for any CMDB, if any of you have seen any of our other CMDB webinars or video content in Flyform, we go on and on about the data model. So we worked with one particular client that they did a CMDB project, they turned on discovery with no data model, no planning, and they just ingested everything they found. They had over 1 million CIs the next day. So they had 1 million CIs with tens of millions of attributes. Nobody knew what they were looking at, what to do, duplicates, missing data, just all the mess that you can imagine. So whenever we do any CMDB project with a client, okay, what does the data model look like? What CIs do we actually need to go and capture out there to underpin your processes? And even then, against those CIs, what attributes do we need to capture? If we don't need it, we take it off the list. And if you can't identify an owner, take it off the list. There's no point putting it on day one if you can't find an owner. So if it's that critical to you, find an owner and put that owner in the data model as well. Number 9, delivering phases. As I said earlier, you're not going to get a unicorn Nirvana CMDB overnight. I'd love to. I used to think we could ourselves. I tried it several times in my career, and I thought I did it a couple of times. I look back now, and I know a few months later, those CMDBs were not in the state I left them. I go back to clients now who've done a project with me. They haven't put the right bits in place. You go back and it's out of date. So take a phased approach. What are the burning business kind of problems you're trying to solve with a CMDB? Pick the top 3 or 5. What do we need to do to solve those first business challenges first? Let's do a phased approach where we'll solve these top 3 challenges first. A, you give yourself something realistic and tangible that you can actually do. B, you can take that back into the business. So you can go back into your business, into your internal, your CFOs, your directors, budget holders, and say, look, we've done this first phase of work, it's gone really well. We've measured against our objectives we set out, we've achieved them. Can we have some more money, please, and some more buy-in to go to phase 2, phase 3, because we want to take this to this massive level. So delivering a phased approach is a really good way. There's nothing worse in terms of going in with one big hit than a CMDB project, because it can go on and on and on. As with most of your IT environments, they're ever changing. You're constantly adding in new servers, new equipment every day, so by the time you start and you're 3 months in, the landscape's changed already, and all of a sudden you're missing things again. So it gives you time to take a breath, figure out, did we do good, where are we at, and move in from there. And finally, this is a really big one for us, so culture. Don't forget to bring the people along for the journey. So this is, in many cases, an organizational change. People aren't used to it. They've all got their own spreadsheets somewhere, their own databases, multiple different systems around the organization. You're going to need these people to be data owners, to buy into the process, to want to maintain the data with you, to want to use that data source. So communication up front, telling everyone the importance of the project and bringing them along is key. How we always advise people to do that in most cases is by getting the senior buy-in. Make sure you've got senior buy-in in your organization and get those people to sponsor and champion that project with you, and that'll help you bring everyone else along for the journey. So, in any SIAM environment, we talk about all the different kind of tooling that you'll need. Everyone gets really, we all get locked onto ITSM all the time. And obviously ITSM, for a lot of us here, even though we talk about the breadth and the brilliance of the Now platform, ITSM is still a core part, but there's also all this other stuff that's going to really feed into that SIAM tooling kind of policy vision that you've got. So discovery tooling we talked about. Software asset management is often comes up in the discovery phase of a project. People kind of focus on physical assets, what are we getting? And then you find out they actually want that stuff so they can do their software asset management. People get hit with big compliance bills, they don't know where their stuff is, they're wasting a lot of money with not reclaiming licensing and harvesting, so bringing SAM tooling into the mix can really help. Capacity management, where are our servers? Do we have enough? Are we spinning things up and leaving them out there? Are we having cloud sprawl? All these kind of questions come into play. Do we have enough to deliver our projects that are coming up? Reporting is obviously a fundamental of any SIAM project, so the whole purpose of this SIAM layer, this integration layer, is giving you that reporting visibility. So you want to see how are your suppliers performing, who are the high performers, low performers, how is all that stuff looking? So getting that into the procedure and the policy up front is key. And finally, we're seeing a lot more with event management. So Typically, a lot of people in SIAM will have the individual towers, so the comms, the infrastructure tower, application tower, they're running their own event management, so they're monitoring the service they're providing for you. In a lot of cases now, we're seeing the SIAM layer, the client, wanting to see that data. They want to ingest that event management data themselves for the transparency. They want to see how many events we really get in, are they really being triaged properly, can we get more intelligence and drive better business decisions out of that data? And tying all of these elements and more in, it will really give you a much better kind of successful SIAM deployment with your customers. SIAM challenges, so strategy, getting the right tooling, getting that model we just talked about. What's the governance? Who are owning the different bits? Who owns the processes, the tooling, the procedures? Who are the data owners? Getting that CMDB into the SIAM discussions very early. Bringing it, we really want these things talked about at a contractual level, so if you can get in early when people are buying new towers or doing a new SIAM project and actually go into the suppliers up front as part of the contract and say, guys, we want you to use our tool, we want you to use this discovery framework, we want you to do this, and get that in the contract, you're then safe. Because once the contract's signed, the security guys are there, the process owners in the other company there, no one wants to play ball nice, they want to do change controls, they want to charge you more money, they want to delay projects, it gets very messy and political. So if you can get that into the contracts, you'll definitely be on a winning foot. And then just getting that model design. So work with someone like Steve Morgan from Syniad or one of our consultants, get that target operating model. What does that overall SIAM model look like? How does it operate day to day? Get it all agreed up front, tied in on paper, and you should be in a much better place. Some of the more low-level stuff, so again, just from a process perspective, service requests, tickets, your incidents, reporting, and then the big one then is the synchronization. So are you integrating those tools into the supplier's tooling? So as I said earlier, we either prefer you to onboard, get those suppliers onto your tool. If you can't do that, the next best thing down, a fully bidirectional web services integration where these tools are talking to each other in real time, so you don't have supplier A logging a ticket that sits there for half an hour before it gets noticed, it then comes to you and sits for another hour, it needs to go to supplier B and no one's remembered, and then you're going back and forth, and it really breaks things down quite quickly. So the more automated, the more synchronized you can make that, the better service you'll get at the end of the day. So very briefly, our top tips, so develop a target operating model, aim for that single source of truth. Where is the single source of truth going to be? Ideally, it's in you, the client, it's in your environment, so you should own that single source of truth, or at least own the access and the kind of the layer that brings all that together. Integration, as again I've talked about procurement and contracts. Get these suppliers, tell them up front, we're going to integrate with you, or you're going to use our tools. One or the other, we'll work with you to whatever you can do, but this is how it's going to be. Work with them early. This is always late, so people are always in with these suppliers, they're 3 months into a deployment, no one's got them in early and actually talked about all these factors that are happening, and it puts them on the back foot. Some contractuals, SLAs, and obviously that data access stuff, so. And that's it, guys, so hopefully that's been helpful for you. As Michelle said, we've got a competition on for our Sonos speaker if you want to get scanned and win that. We've got a platinum stand up at the back if you want to come and speak to us about SIAM, ITSM, ITOM, any of the stuff, or feel free to ask some questions now. Follow Flyform on LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn. We've got a whole bunch of video content on this topic and others, and we'd love to talk to you about it. So thanks very much.
Wonderful. Has anybody got any questions for Phil? Anyone got any questions? If not, Flyform is situated to the left diagonal of the hall. So please pay them a visit. If you want to win a prize, go and have a chat with them. Thank you very much. You have a question?
So, Phil, what kind of customer, so very great presentation. For customers that you're working with, what kind of mindset do they need to be able to do what you just said?
I think they need to just be aware of the journey ahead of them. You know, the preparation is key, so get prepared, get into a mindset of this is going to be a journey, get that early engagement with the suppliers, and then just be ready to hit it. You know, you've got experts like Flyform, like other partners here that can take you on that journey, but just come in with an open mind and get ready to work, really. How
many customers have you delivered this for at the moment?
Probably 4 or 5 this year and another 5 last year, so we've probably done 10 on a major scale. I mean, CMDB itself, we deliver all the customers, so 30, 40 customers this year. SIAM in particular, though, tends to be generally the larger clients, but we've got a lot of experience in delivering it and also in highly regulated or government industries we've done a lot of as well, which is why stuff is so key.
I guess it's the outcomes, isn't it, that you want to showcase after doing it?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got some case studies on the website as well from some of our bigger clients who've done this, and they speak for themselves, so you can go and look at them and take a look.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Any other questions, guys? Any other questions? Fantastic. Let me do a bit of an Annika Rice. She's coming up. Let's go into the left. There you go.
Hi there, Phil.
Hi.
Just a question about your work with the public sector.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that very early on. How easy was it to be able to put this in place with public sector organisations?
It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all, but we're fortunate that I've been in the ServiceNow ecosystem for 11 years. So I started very, very early on. We were in the first 100 customers in Europe for ServiceNow. So we've been around the block, and we've been around the block with doing this with public sector for probably 4 or 5 years. So we're used to those challenges. I mean, most of the challenges I just put up there are the typical ones. You've got these old legacy contracts. Suppliers are in shared data centers, or they've got other rules. They don't want to share their data. They don't want to let you plug in. If they do, they want to charge you a bunch of money to do it. So I think it's a lot of political conversations, and that's why we always try and say, do those early engagements, get people on board with you, and I think that'll really make it a lot easier for everyone. There's definitely a lot of lessons we can share that will make it a lot easier for people who are embarking on that journey.
How important is it to get the right people on board at the very beginning, and how do you identify those people?
It's essential, so if you don't get that right, nothing else will work. If the people aren't on board, no one's going to play ball. In terms of identifying them, we've got a hit list we give out, but it's who's going to be consuming the data and who's going to be feeding into the data. So if you can just get a list of those first, and then the senior people that need to back them up, the rest kind of falls into place.